comments that have been requested at this time?
Okay.
All right, so seeing that, do we have any submitted public comments? No, okay. Yeah, so we'll get right on to the meat of the presentation. Very good.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm up here, is that right?
Yes.
Well, good morning. I appreciate you allowing me to have some time today. When the HRTAC legislation was put in place, obviously it is chaired and populated by the elected officials. But it was always envisioned that there would be another group, this group called the Technical Review Committee, and that may be a little bit misnomer. It's really the committee that's put in place to help guide some of the policy and other decisions that are made by the elected officials in HRTAC. As you know, there's some $170 to $180 million a year that is raised locally through the House Bill 2313 that gives this region control of those monies, whether or not it chooses or participates with the state on its statewide funds. The funds were put in place not to be in place of the statewide funds, and that's why we want to be separate. But the money was put there and required by the law to get these regionally specific projects going that we've been talking about for really decades. So that's really what the purpose of this committee is for you to offer policy and other guidance, financial and other guidance, to the members of HRTAC as they make their decisions going forward. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Let's see if I do this right. So, in an effort to help you with that, and I made this comment at a couple of other meetings, working with our public-private partnership office, the P3 office, and VDOT and others, we have developed a planning tool that you can use to help in your deliberation. Now, if you choose after this presentation, you don't like this planning tool, that's okay with me. But what we thought we would do is give you something that looks at all the different parameters that go in these decisions to bring them back to some type of financial analysis or reality. Now, with me today, I have Declan McManus from KPMG. I have Dusty Holcomb from the P3 office, Charlie Kilpatrick, Commissioner of VDOT, have all been involved in this model. By the way, the model was developed with state funds, did not come out of your budget, and I'm committed to continuing to use state funds, and these both VDOT, KPMG under contract with the state, and the P3 office at our expense to support this effort. But as I said, if you think that it in any way translates into some type of mandate from the state or you feel uncomfortable, then you have the opportunity to just say, no thank you, we don't want to use this model, we don't want your help. Now, I don't mean that to be negative. I really want to make clear that this is only here to support. I'm not prejudging what comes out of this model. And I know others on this panel have a lot of experience, Dr. Cook and others have a lot of experience with financial models, and so the inputs and things can be questioned. We understand that. And in fact, if you think they need to be changed, also from that perspective. So there's no predetermined output here as to what we're trying to accomplish, other than supporting you as a business and professional group to help HRTAC make good policy and political decisions. So that's this model is there to evaluate different scenarios to help with project prioritization, financing, and delivery in the Hampton Roads region. It has multiple built-in levers. In other words, there are different levers or inputs to correspond with the availability of funding. You can solve to say, what's the quickest way to build these? To meet stakeholder needs, if we decide that you want to do a particular project first, we can put that in and see what it does to the other projects. To leverage revenues if you decide to use tax-exempt bonds or financing. To adjustable input assumptions for sensitivity analysis. Let's say that you think construction prices are going to raise higher than we have projected. I think in the model we've got inflation going up 3% for the next decade or so, and then 2% thereafter. You may decide that that's not a good parameter for interest rate. Matter of fact, quite frankly, I've seen substantially higher than that in the actual cost of construction for projects like this. If you decide to use toll revenues and toll revenue bonds for upfront funding, it can take that into account. And alternative delivery methods, like if you want to do pay-as-you-go, design, build, finance, or using any other innovative technique for construction, the model is designed to take that into account. So again, these are inputs, and they all are subject to discretion as to whether or not you think those inputs are good. This planning tool is flexible. It's actually, I don't have a copy of it here, but it's a model, just like you'd see, and you'd expect to see, where you put in the inputs and a spreadsheet comes out. It's flexible, so the assumptions can be adjusted to assess the impact, as I said, on project delivery. Prioritization of project, you can solve for that. Project phasing, availability of funding, construction costs and length, project revenues, all these different things. I'm going to read them all, but the delivery method, all of those are capable of being handled in this model. And it's important to note that these decisions do have impact on policy decisions, and vice versa. And that's really what the real intention of this model is to give you some input and some expectations as decisions are made. Now, I'll go through an example of using this tool. Now, I don't know if you've seen, but this is the slide that I presented to the HRTAC board, the committee of the elected officials, about the projects that they had, I believe it was Thursday night, a public forum, a public hearing on moving these particular projects forward. In short, it is widening 64 on the peninsula to a third lane in each direction up through the western I-99 interchange. It is also having on this side of the water the 264, 64 interchange built between Norfolk and Virginia Beach. The direction was there would be no tolls associated with those particular projects. There would be no bonding used. It would be pay-as-you-go. So that's what Liz presented here. In addition, it was directed to move forward on completing the environmental work on the Patriots Crossing and the high-rise bridge. Well, that's what was agreed to by HRTAC. They proposed to put this in their budget. So that's where we started this model from. In other words, we said, well, we know we're going to do this. Now, let me explain to you, nominal costs are the costs that if we were able to do these projects today. The actual costs nominal costs are what the projects are going to actually cost in the future. If we could build them all today, they would be less. So the project costs are assumed to be what's in place when it starts for construction, when you actually advertise. So if we had a magic wand and could just build all these projects today's dollars, they'd be a little less. Now, on these particular projects, since they only go out 5 or 6 years, the nominal cost and the actual cost are not much difference. But as you see in the future, I'll go through another model, the longer you go out, obviously those nominal costs increase. In other words, so you have to match that to the money's coming in. So this is nothing new, but this is what HRTAC board has developed, or has proposed to starting with using the regional monies. And you can't read this, I know, but this is the slide that just basically shows starting with the monies we have on hand, starting with the monies that are in the 6-year plan designated for these projects. These are how the flows will go in and out, and it shows that we can build these projects over the next 6 or 7 years with the cash that we expect coming in from the regional monies. Now, we're a little conservative on these cash flows. Since coming into office, House Bill 2313, the landmark legislation that Governor McDonald passed with legislative support this last year in office, it was projected $3.5 billion was going to be raised from that, and roughly $200 million a year coming out of this region. Since then, since coming into office, those projections have been reduced on a statewide basis from 3.5 to roughly 2.3 billion. Almost a third of the revenues have been, and the projections have gone away because of the lower amount of fuel, price of fuel, and the lessened economic activity, particularly in Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia, related to sequester. I know Dr. Cook did a state of the region analysis, and that was fully pointed out there, the impact that Department of Defense spending has had. We have seen that translate into a reduction in projections going forward for our revenues. So these projections, we've reduced to about I think it's about 160 million a year that we're projecting going forward. Hopefully we'll do better, but that's really what we're seeing right now based on the economic activity. By the way, just as a side note, the governor and the legislature are dealing with this also on the budget, on the general fund side. As you know, that's been a significant hold to plug. But we're hearing from economists that probably this year may be the best year in the next 3 or 4 in terms of collections. So we're not getting a very positive feed that revenues from transportation or other are going to increase over the next few years. So this is a very basic use of the model. We can almost do this on a spreadsheet. It says, here's what the jobs cost. If we had to solve this based on construction and when the monies come in, and it's clear to see that we can build these projects out of cash flow with these projections over the next 6 or 7 years. So this is the first use of the model that I know HRTAC has used to put in front of the public, to put in their budget to move these particular projects forward. And the next slide just shows where these projects are. I know you're all familiar with them. But again, it's widening 64 to each lane, an additional lane on each direction on the peninsula, and 264-64 interchange here on the south side. In addition to moving forward the environmental on the Patriot Crossing and the high-rise bridge. Now, I took the point because I've been reading a lot of, there's a lot of uncertainty, I think is the best word to put it about what can be done with the regional monies. I know that the TPO has voted to put all these plans in their long-range plan. However, you still need to identify a revenue source for how these are going to be constructed. And as of right now, that revenue source has not been identified in that. But nonetheless, we do have this $160, $170 million coming in. So what I have done going forward is solve for some scenarios. One is, and before I get to it, let me say that this is not meant to be the final answer. This is meant to be illustrative. And what I've used to solve is, if we just simply use the monies coming in, how long will it take to build these projects? So in other words, I've solved for the quickest way to do the projects with the monies coming in. So if we go to the next slide, that's what you have. This is a pay-as-you-go for additional projects. These are the projects that are contemplated as the initial financial plan that the TPO can deliver. And you can see all of them are up here, that none of these should be any surprise to anybody. And again, before we start with the order, I solve for the quickest way to get them done. I'm not suggesting that's the way we should do it. I'm just suggesting as a pay-as-you-go. Now, this is what I was thinking before. On the left side here are the estimated costs in today's dollars if we could magically go build all these overnight. And they pretty much agree to what you have seen in your TPO slides, with one exception, That is the Patriots Crossing. The Cranny Island connector you do not have in your numbers. There was an assumption that the Port of Virginia would build this, and I would suggest to you that is probably not a good assumption. Because the policy of the McCullough administration is that any infrastructure that the port would pay for would be on its own premises. You've all read that where we've been with the port, we are working to have it sustainable, and that if in fact there is any excess revenue there with the port, they have plenty of needs to invest in their infrastructure. So there is roughly a little about $1.2 billion in the Patriots Crossing that is included for the Cranny Island connector. So if you take that out, these numbers are pretty much a few percentage points of what you at the TPO have said they cost. Now, by the way, we've had Commissioner Kilpatrick, along with the P3 office, actually have had these costs really gone out and talked with the industry. So these are just more than just back of the envelope costs. They're not design costs, but they're pretty solid based on our experience with other projects in the area and across the state of being built. And they, again, are very close to the costs that you have estimated for your planning. Now, the next column is what they will actually cost if we were able to build them not when we have the money. So in other words, if you look at this, the quickest way to move all these projects forward is to start with the high-rise bridge. And we can't really start constructing that until the year 2028 because we won't have enough money in the till to be able to get us to move the construction forward. So if you look at this, solve only for the quickest way to build the remaining projects if we simply use the cash that we're bringing in. It's going to take us about 67 years to build these projects. Now, I will also tell you that's based on the fact that we only think inflation is going to be 3% in terms of the cost of these projects. If we were to use today's inflation that we're experiencing for the cost of these projects, because of significant demand around the world, you really can't solve this. We don't take in enough money to actually keep up with the inflation. But I just wanted to point out that if in fact we can keep inflation at 3%, excuse me. That we can build these, but it will take us 67 years to get the projects completed on a pay-as-you-go basis. So even though we've got this significant amount of money coming in, these are extremely expensive projects, and you can see what they grow to by the time we actually get the building in that. So that's the first scenario that I brought. The second one is, I know that in this group has, or at least HRTAC, has expressed in the TPO the number one priority is the Patriots Crossing. So I then went and solved to say, okay, we're going to start with the Patriots Crossing because that's what the policy is. Assuming everything else is equal, we're going to pay as you go. How long will it take us to build these projects? And because that's a fairly significant project, we can't start building it until 2053 as far as accumulating the monies. And so it's going to take us 70 years to build these projects if we start with that. All things being equal, everything else being equal, that we're only going to pay as you go. Now, I need to point out here, if you change the assumptions, if you think inflation is going to be a little different, if you think we can collect more money, if you decide to use tolls, that changes everything. But I'm just solving this for the monies that we get as a pay-as-you-go basis. So that pushes us out too significant. Now, if you go to the next slide, I said, well, let's introduce in here if we're able to bond. We have bonding authority here. Let's introduce that we're going to go out and securitize the monies that come in, the regional monies that we do. Now, what that actually lets you to do is it moves the first project up pretty quickly because you're able to fund that and get it started by the use of bonds. And I assume 30-year bonds with a 5% yield. So I've just recently returned from New York. We issued these bonds bonds at the state. By the way, this is issued by HRTAC. These are not obligations of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it doesn't affect our AAA credit rating, Senator Lucas, or any impact in that. It does not impact that. But our bonds at the state are rated AA+, one notch for transportation, one notch below by taking the statewide monies to bond. I would expect you to be a little bit below that. That's why we're in the 5% range. And I should also point out that this construction doesn't mean when the bonds will be paid off. In fact, if we use bonds only, we can reduce the time needed for these projects to 62 years, but we'll still be in the next century paying the bonds off. In other words, so we're still in the next century even if we use bonds. So that was another, and again, I solved this for the quickest way to do it. I'm not suggesting to you that, again, you may for traffic management or planning other things to do something else. I'm just simply showing you what the model and giving you some idea of the tasks we have ahead of us. Now, if you go to the next page, again, you point out here, I went back to saying the quickest way to do it is doing the high-rise bridge first if you only consider financial considerations, no toll, no third-party stuff. So that's what I've used consistently going through here. But the next one assumes, I've heard calls that, the state needs to continue to put money into these projects. And that's true. Although let me point out to you, there are three significant problems or political realities that have to be dealt with if that's the case. Number one, that assumes we get the same reimbursement from the Federal Highway Trust Fund over the period that these projects are being done. As you know, that was insolvent, thought to be insolvent last August. There's no guarantee that we'll continue our reimbursement rate. 50% of all the monies the state used for construction come from the Fed, so that's a risk. The second risk is, again, our statewide monies. As I said, they've been reduced by $1 billion, almost a third, $1.2 billion since coming into office. There's a chance they can be reduced again. House Bill Revenue 2313 legislation did put additional monies in, but it was in the out years of the plan. It was beginning in years 2020 going forward. So they're not available now, but there may be some monies in the future years, assuming we don't continue to have lessened projections based on economic activity. There's also the political reality that as of January 1st this year, because the Marketplace Equity Act appears not to be going to be passed in Congress, there's an automatic increase to keep our revenues at the state level of the wholesale tax from 3.5 to 5.1%, or about 3 cents a gallon. I'm going back this afternoon. There are those who want to stop that. If that's the case, there's another $1 billion, $1.2 billion that will come out of the state year plan. So I'm pointing out to you that I believe the state will be committed, but the state has some issues too as we go through. But nonetheless, what I've done in this model has assumed that the state will contribute another $1 billion. But they will give another $1 billion starting in year 2020, $150 million in that year, $500 million in 2021, $250 million in 2022, an additional $100 million in the year after that. 2024, actually skipped a year, for $1 billion. By the way, that would take most of all the money in the 6-year plan on a statewide basis. And I'll leave it up to Mr. Malvin and the other CTP members if he thinks that they're going to allocate all the money to Hampton Roads, but I'm assuming they will in that regard. Even if we do that, we can cut this down, and it's going to take us 60 years. So even with bonding, the state putting in another $1 billion, it's still going to take us 60 years to build these projects with the only sole revenue source of being the monies that we collect here at the state level and some additional contributions from the Commonwealth. Now, the reason I've only solved it for these, that's the stated position right now of HRTAC, is that there is a whole debate going on with tolls. So I'm not here to assume whether or not they should be tolls or not. I know, again, Dr. Cook addressed those impacts in his regional State of the Region report. I'm only suggesting the reality is that without them, this is what we're looking at as far as we deliver these projects going forward. Now, again, you may disagree that inflation ought to be something else. Maybe you get more money. So guys, maybe I'm off 4 or 5 years. Okay, but the reality is we're not going to be able to build these in the next 7 or 8 years without alternative sources of revenue. And this again is just a picture of the projects. This does not include, by the way, anything at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. So that's nothing. And I would suggest to you to think that in the next 30, 40, 50 years, that we don't have anything at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel is probably unrealistic. But it does not assume that in there, anything at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. So, sort of summarize here, this model is developed to help you to run multiple scenarios to see the cause and effect of different assumptions. It can forecast the projected costs, the revenues, the funding availability, depending on, I'm sure there'll be a robust discussion on what the inputs ought to be in that regard. And it allows you guys to help make informed decisions to the governing board as what the ramifications of their decisions are. If we were to use all the available innovative financing sources and alternative revenue streams, that is tolls, whether it's hot lane, fixed tolls, whatever, these projects can be built in between 30 and 35 years. And it's because of the power of money. If you do tolling up front, the money comes in, it's the cross-collateralization, it's strictly the power of money as to what it is. So, I'm not suggesting that, I'm saying that that is, if you go through that, this can be short. And with that, I also want to give you some contact information. My office and the P3 office, again, we are here to support the effort. That's what this committee is for, to really hash out what decisions are to be made and making recommendations for moving these projects forward. I'll reiterate again, you don't have to use this model. You can tell us that, goodbye, and I'm okay with that. But I did want to say that the governor asked me, and so did the Finance Committee and others, asked me to stand up this until you got the people in place for the executive director and all that. I know TPO has been doing a lot of work. We are here, but I want to reiterate for the, 10th time I've said it, this is not a state mandate. It is not. We are here to support. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the group may have, and I do have my experts here to help me if there are any questions. I'm here, Frank.
Mr. Secretary, aside from all of the stuff that you've laid out, Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel opened on July 1, 1958. I don't know what kind of physical conditions it's in, but given its age, it seems to me that at some point in the not-too-distant future, somebody's going to have to take a serious look at, I'm not talking about widening it or any of that, I'm just talking about doing maintenance, repair, whatever it's going to take, rehab. And if that has to be closed, or lanes of that have to be closed to accommodate that, the bottleneck in Hampton Roads is going to be beyond incredible. And it seems to me that some time frame for that issue being addressed in terms of other modalities for access across Hampton Roads needs to be done in parallel. Otherwise, we've created even a greater problem than we have today.
Now, I could not agree more. A couple of things on that. I should have mentioned this model assumes that once these projects are built, VDOT and the state will maintain them. So there's no maintenance in these numbers. This is strictly construction. Any ongoing maintenance and all are in here. Now, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, I agree. We have a similar situation in Northern Virginia on the American Legion Bridge, and where it's very political about what to do. But to think those assets are not going to need something in the next 50 years is just not being honest with yourself. One of the things I've asked, where's Jim Lutterback? I know Jim's got Jim. I've asked him, there was a study done, this is on the state's time, there was a study done a few years ago where there were some some immediate things that we could do to maybe help the conditions there. We're working on that to see if we can do that. I will tell you though, even if we get all the way to Richmond, I should mention, met with the Richmond MPO and have begun discussions with them to begin coming the other way for a third lane, at least from 295 through the truck stop. They're putting together which will take care of most of the congestion between here and Richmond if we do this, although we want to keep going, this will be 23 miles in that. But even if we do that and we don't fix the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel in some way, we still are going to have the bottlenecks. I think from my reviewing of this, not just the financial, but look at the traffic modeling, these projects are not mutually exclusive. Just because you put in a third crossing does not mean we've solved all the issues at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. Same thing with the high-rise bridge, we haven't solved all the issues. So they're not mutually exclusive. They can help, but I think that, I personally believe that needs to be considered as you make these decisions. But I want to point out, that is not in these numbers.
And where does this group get the information that would allow us to make that analysis?
I would say there's two, TPO and also VDOT. We have analysis of, look, I don't think anybody, when I was on the CTB, there was this whole effort going on to widen the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, the 8 lanes in each direction. That's not only I don't think good, it's not really feasible. I mean, it's just not. But, so we would be happy to look at other alternatives. But heretofore, we have not been given direction, and I don't want to get ahead of what the direction is. Other than the fact that I've asked Jim Utterback to look at immediate things we can do to help that, and from that perspective. But VDOT could provide that information. I believe the TPO could also be frank.
Well, let me just finally say that it seems to me a critical analysis that we have an understanding of when the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel is going to need major renovation, improvement, upgrading, whatever the right word is, that will by necessity restrict traffic access through. That you won't be able to do all the work you need to do and keep all 4 lanes open. So it seems to me that we need to have some sense of when that, based on an engineering analysis, needs to be done in what time frame. Because if it's 30 years from now, that's one thing. If it's 5 or 10 years from now, that's a different thing. And then side by side to that, it seems to me we need to understand what other facilities need to be accomplished in a time frame such that what has to be diverted from Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel while it's being upgraded or maintained or repaired or whatever the right word is, can accommodate the traffic that needs to go through Hampton Roads to keep mobility moving in the region.
Happy to do that. I would require the TPO giving direction to VDOT to move forward with the environmental that's outstanding on the. We can certainly adjust that to accommodate that. I actually think that needs to be happened, but it will take the TPO directing VDOT. Right now, there's a direct for the TPO not to consider anything at the Hampton Roads Tunnel.
I think in helping you, Mr. Frank, I think what he's looking for is, do we have a target date where 100-year maintenance or 75-year maintenance is going to be done on the tunnel that would shut down a lane? That's really what you're looking for.
Yeah, and right now we're trying to do that as we go. I don't think anything is going to. Right now, there's nothing that says we're going to shut it down.
Okay, that I think is the answer.
No, I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for a program to fix the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel.
Right.
I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for an analysis of when the projection is that might happen, and if during that process, whatever it is, you're going to have to divert traffic.
Yeah, I don't think that right now there is nothing, and I'll be happy to go back and look. Don't see anything on the horizon for that.
Okay.
Well, that's because it hadn't been planned for. The question is, if it were planned for, what would you see on the horizon?
Well, we are. That's a little bit not accurate. We're doing ongoing maintenance there, trying to keep up. We are. I mean, we have. Remember, just a few years ago we shut it down, and we happened to shut down that along with a couple of others as we go through. But I'll let the commissioner talk. There's no plans in right now to have an extended closing of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. None. And don't think it's needed to keep up with repairs.
Yeah, at this point, the structural integrity of the tube, the cams themselves are in good condition and stable. What happens continuously, though, we'll have to repave those tubes about every 10 years or so. We're upgrading the electrical systems. Those electrical systems, some of them 50 years old. So we're going through that process, lighting. Eventually, the fan system is going to need to be upgraded or replaced. And those tunnels today do not have fire suppression. So that's one of the other areas. So those types of activities that can occur below the road deck or above the road deck, can be done while traffic is moving. But you all are well aware a few years ago when we shut the tubes down in order to repave and the frankly the mess that was created. We just can't do some of those repair work without physically closing the tunnel to traffic. Maybe overnight, but whenever it is, it will require full tunnel closure. But at this point, we are not scheduled to do a major reconstructive effort inside the tubes.
Yeah, but what about the bridges leading to the tubes?
The trusses,
That seems to be where more deterioration.
and the trestles leading from both sides, we've done some work on what we call pile jackets. And what folks see out there where it looks like the concrete's coming loose, that's what's considered a sacrificial jacket that went around the original pile. So those will need to be repaired though. And that's an ongoing project where, absent having another trestle, we're going to have to do it under traffic, which means a much more expensive process of supporting the bridge as we're redoing the concrete work on the trestle.
But you can do that without preventing traffic from using
In most cases we can, except for if there's a need for a deck replacement. And of course we've done some things around the state. We've been able to pull sections of deck off overnight and bring them back in, and basically precast sections, pull them off and replace them. As to whether or not we can do it on this trestle, I just don't know at this point.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary,
Senator Lucas.
for the longest time, members of the legislature has wavered to try to come up with some long-term sustainable source of funding to take care of not only new construction but also maintenance. And I've been elected 30 years, and it seems to me that we're 30 years behind trying to find that stream of funding. But with all of the repair work that we have to do, the maintenance dollars are shrinking, so we're finding ourselves in the same situation as we are funding new construction and taking care of maintenance. So we gotta donate sword here.
Yeah, again, that's why I point out, Senator, that the maintenance of these facilities, once constructed, will be a state obligation. So unlike some of the other P3 here, like the downtown, midtown tunnel, that obligation would remain with the Commonwealth of Virginia. Yeah, Mr. West.
Mr. Secretary, your presentation talks about 60 to 75 years to do these plans, these projects, the way you've laid them out. And I really appreciate that because it gets it in focus for me pretty quickly. Jim Cook has been after us as a region for a number of years to think about economic competitiveness, and we're heading in the wrong direction as a region, generally, I think. And I believe infrastructure, a region that doesn't have high-quality infrastructure is probably not going to be leading back on improving their economic competitiveness. So as I see your presentation, I guess my question to you would be, you said that if we used every available source, including tolls, that we could do this in 30 years.
Somewhere between 30 and 35 years, depending on inflation. About half of what we're looking at.
If you give me the option of doing something in 30 years or 60 years, I can tell you what my answer is. And so I guess my question is, what has the commission, what's their position so far? In other words, you don't have a slide in here that shows the 30 years, you just have one to show the other.
Now, that has been, we've received no direction, and it's been a very hot topic at discussions, and so did not want to take the liberty of presuming any direction other than what we've been given.
Would that be a direction that, Bill casting doubt on exactly our role here, but would that be a direction that we could, that we as a group could ask for, if anybody happens to agree with my theory of 30, 30, and 60?
Yes, sir, we'd be happy to provide that for this group.
We sort of tossed the stake on the griddle here. I've been doing some doodling. Suppose we put tolls on Monitor Merrimack, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel on Route 17, $1 a passage each way. And we had 80,000 average passages a day, 365 days a year. We have more than that on Sundays, but you have to think about Saturdays and Sundays. That would raise slightly less than $3 billion a year, $2.9 billion a year for $1 back and forth on all three of those. That takes care of our problem. I think that, and I might add, my research suggests that that would not deter very many people or distort locational activities very much. We do some of that, but not very much of it. I think that's the direction only that we have to go. We cannot do this without tolls. And I've been out there saying we have to look at the size of the tolls, but $1 per passage is not something that would change many people's behavior.
Yes, sir, I would put one other thing in that there are some, I'm not sure if it's for this group, but certainly is a question for the state. We do have some issues with existing toll facilities in competitive things, but having said that, that's back of the envelope I put very close to where we are. So yes, sir.
And I want to make clear that there's one other thing that we've been working to under HRTAC, and that is that there should be an alternate. I thought that was a policy that we were discussing. So simply to say that you could toll every bridge is not allowed. Is that correct?
Well, it's certainly I think it's a policy of the Governor McCullough's administration is, if you look in Northern Virginia, we've had much better acceptance of tolling because in addition to the hot lanes, there is a free alternative.
So when we go back to the political, you have the list of a few political things that were in our way, we could probably add that as one of the things that would have to be considered politically.
Yeah, that's why typically, if you look, you could finance the capacity. For instance, if you had a managed lanes concept, or it could be a static toll. But having the capacity financed by the alternative that was tolled versus free. But of course, when you get into that, then we get into a whole lot of other different things about how you manage the traffic. In other words, and there is obviously, and we've seen, we have solved the issue of congestion at the downtown midtown tunnels. I'm not saying we solved it correctly, but we have solved that issue. So there is an avoidance in that regard. Yeah, that's why I said these are all interlinked.
I just wanted to bring it out so it's in everybody's forefront that you can't just, pop your holes up everywhere and solve the issue because you have a political thing. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, tell us what are the sort of prohibitions? That is, what are the things that you don't think or the government doesn't think would be acceptable if we came up with to begin with, or the legislature? What are those things? And while we're talking about that, my view early on has been that if you start tolling before you start construction, then you have an accumulation of funds that reduce the amount that you borrow, and so the total debt to get these projects done is less, and you get them done more quickly. And I'd like the opportunity to look at that, but I know that FHWA has a policy about not tolling facilities that are already built, and only those that are going to be built.
There are real examples here in the Commonwealth that I can point to in that regard. In fact, I was in Melbourne, Australia, and it was exactly the topic of my report was policy decisions, looking at how they do them and how we do them, just trying to get some ideas. Where we have used, while it does allow more money to come in tolling before you have capacity enhancements or any type of repair is a real problem for public policy. That has caused, I believe, a lot of the issues here in Hampton Roads for acceptance of using tolling. In fact, at the downtown Midtown Tunnel, not only did we toll them before the capacity was done, we took away capacity because we closed one of the tunnels because we had to rehab it. So I think from a financially, it is a tool. That's why I said interrelated. I think policy-wise, that is not a good policy in that. The other is that whenever possible, and I would say from our perspective, we believe that can always be the case, and that is to use tolls that there's always a reasonable free alternative. That's why I believe the managed lane concept, a hot lane concept in Northern Virginia. Now, you do bring in less revenue because there's an avoidance, you have the choice, but that has been much better received in the public because they have the choice in that. And I do believe there's an opportunity for us here in Hampton Roads to do that. But to say that the governor has said, first of all, let me make it clear, this is your money. The only time we're actually even involved is if you want us to put more state money on something. I want to make clear, the CTB doesn't make this decision. This is the HRTAC. So while we could say we think that's a bad decision, we won't support it, we don't have that, and this has not become for the CTB. The law, this is controlled in this region. I would say that, quite frankly, that would impact your, I think it's now, if you look at the bond markets, they're not as hip about having, if that's the wrong word, they're not as positive about using monies in advance of the project being done because they think it impacts the long-term ability for using it. So it might be a short-term fix to get money quicker, but it may impact the long-term revenue generation from the project in that. But in terms, that's we would offer guidance, but there are, this board is the one, the HRTAC will do the policy.
Well, I just want to make sure that, again, we're talking apples and apples. If we went to CTB and say we were able to leverage some of that $1 billion, but
Right.
probably not all of it, would the governor's policy be in play on HRTAC?
I think, well, first of all, the CTB is independent of the governor. I think I would advocate that it would be intact because I don't believe that is a wise use of statewide monies.
Just want to make sure. Any other questions? Ms. Wagner?
We appreciate the tool, but I think we need professionals to help us play
Yes.
such scenarios. Is that KPMG's role, or is this?
You're more than welcome to use them. I'm willing to support this at the state level for a while. Obviously, it goes on for years. I'd ask you to hire them, but no. But I mean, until we get this worked out, you're absolutely at your disposal. The P3 office is at your disposal. That'd be one. Randy Johnson, Deputy Secretary Johnson, has been here coordinating all that, setting up this. More than happy to do that, as long as we will reiterate that we are not dictating an outcome. We are simply here to offer our input and guidance. But yes, there certainly is available. Happy to do that. Mr. Lester?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, I'm obviously a fan of 30 years. I look around the room, I think I may be the oldest one at this table, so 30 years still seems like a long time away for me. And so I'm an advocate for figuring out how to use tolls to shorten this up, realizing that the commission has said that maybe not where they're headed. Was your number of 30 years based on tolling everything?
No, I can let these guys, but it was totally the water crossings only, as I recall, only the water crossings.
Okay.
So we need new capacity at the water crossings?
We would advocate new capacity, although, for instance, there are some that lend themselves better to that. For instance, the high-rise bridge would lend itself to new capacity more so than a third crossing because there is no existing capacity to start with. And so, I think our model includes that the third crossing would have to have a fixed toll because there's really no opportunity to add the capacity since there is none to exist. But those are being brainstormed, I'm sorry, Mr. Davis.
For those of us who've been out of the transportation realm for a little while, would you mind just bringing us up to speed on the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel and why it's excluded from these projects?
Okay. Yeah, why don't I'll let the chairman do that.
I will tell you that the HRTAC is, correct me if I go off course here, familiar, but we are authorized in HRTAC to look at things that are approved by HRTPO. Right now, HRTPO, they are not advocating any changes at HRBT. And that's not a unified position, but it is definitely a majority position. So, and I think it's very wise I think some of the conversation here mirrored some of the conversation at the TPO when it comes to maintenance concerns, as Mayor Frank talked about, when he talked to indeed the amount of flexibility, and when you look at the cost of third crossing, it seems to be the one that seems to be really pushing things to that 60-year mark. No matter whether you do it last or you do it first, it is the big bogey in the room. And so I think any conversation about reprioritizing HRBT needs to be directed to HRTPO. So, in a nutshell. Right?
Just one last thought on that subject. There's been conversations around for some time about congestion pricing on HRTC. Is that something that's underway, or are we taking a look at that possibility? Because if you don't have to spend the capital cost when you can toll a certain hours of the day, it might push off the capital cost to that whenever that day is.
I understand your question, but again, it goes back to the same thing. We're not considering anything in HRBT at this time.
Might add, the state looks at congestion pricing all around the state and that, so. Okay, well, thank you very much for having me here today, and thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
When you said Patriots crossing SEIS, are you actually saying third crossing for the 5 million and change?
Yeah, and I'll let Commissioner Kilpatrick talk to this. We believe that, look, there's certainly a robust environmental process, and we've come across this on 460, and we've come across this on other things across the Commonwealth. Let me just make one public comment about 460. We have a valid contract. There are no additional monies on 460. I know the TPO had asked if we have an analysis of what's left. There is nothing left. If we don't go forward with something, then that will be up to the Commonwealth Transportation Board to allocate those monies. So just want to make it clear, we have a valid contract. We're moving forward. Right now, there is no additional monies coming out of the 460. But back to your question, the environmental process on many projects have gotten stale. So they've asked us to go back and redo them in that. And it was pretty clear to us that on anything to deal with the Patriots Crossing or any section of it, they're going to ask us to look at the entire project. And he may be permanent, I'll let Mr. Kilpatrick expand, but they'll have to look at the entire impact statement, and then they may allow us to build it in sections if it's your desire to do so. But I'm pretty comfortable that the entire impact of widening the tunnel, widening 64, Cranial is going to have to be looked at in the environmentals. Mr. Patrick.
Yes, the original third crossing environmental document actually included HRBT as well as Monitor Merrimack. The Patriots Crossing was really the entire network, and it was solving for reducing congestion, if I recall, at HRBT. So ultimately, there was a record decision for what we call now the third crossing, widening of 664 and the Patriots Crossing piece, including the Crane Island Connector. As we've met with the Federal Highway Administration and the Corps of Engineers, segmenting and doing independent, there's a lot of, I guess the best term is baggage. If you try to continue to push the original environmental document through. We really believe that a fresh environmental document with a fresh purpose and need is the most expeditious way to get through the environmental process. And at this point, we believe it's what I'll call all of the original third crossing, which is 664 from Bowers Hill to the Hampton Coliseum, and then the Patriots Crossing piece as a single environmental document. As the Secretary said, that doesn't mean we have to build it as one piece, and that's part of what we would look to, is to be able to segment the actual construction. But we feel it's very necessary to bring in the Corps of Engineers early on, as well as some other regulatory agencies, to ensure that we don't get too far down the path and get to a point where we have a project that may not be competitive.
So you're also talking that, again, all the segments will be looked at as it relates to the SCIS. So even though we're seeing the word Patriots Crossing, we're really talking about the entire.
Yes, sir, the entire third crossing. And one of the things that we've done recently, the 64 widening project from Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel to downtown Richmond, we had a single environmental document, and then we are getting separate records of decision for constructible segments. That is one technique that we can use. The other is what's called a tiering process, where we have a two-tiered process where we get into greater detail on constructible segments. I think the likely scenario here is back to what we're doing on 64 widening, one environmental document, records of decisions as we have constructible segments. We think that's a pretty straightforward and clear process.
I just want to make one follow-up question. That includes the Craney Island connector.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me here today, and I stand ready to help any way we can, so thank you very much.
okay, thank you very much. Okay, other items on this joint session are more informational. We do have the next meeting of HRTAC on Thursday, November 20th. And that will be for the adoption of the budget. That will be one of the items on the agenda. We did have the public hearing the other night that went very well. I think it was kind of a mixed bag. Most comments were very thoughtful, and the majority of any negative comments dealt with the administrative side of the budget, but not any of the programs on the budget. So I think that's actually a good thing when we get feedback like that people they like the projects. They do have some concerns about how we're going to manage them, and that's okay. I understand that. And then there's an upcoming, I'm assuming this public information meeting is similar to the one that we had on Southside. This is in Southside, and that is on Wednesday, December 10th, 4 to 6. I encourage any member of the public that wants to attend that. It's very, very informational. It's run very well. You get a tremendous amount of information on the projects themselves, on the ability and the lack of abilities. I won't say that. But what the HRTAC can do and cannot do in terms of that. So it cleared up a lot of public misconceptions. And that's all I have, unless somebody else has something they'd like to discuss. Saying nothing, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.